I was just reading, there's no agenda.
Nobody added anything to the agenda.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. So I was going to say, I feel like since we don't really have an agenda for today, I personally have nothing prepped. So I feel like it would be more respectful of everybody's time if we call this meeting canceled unless there's anything pressing that we want to discuss. So typically the way I do this is I wait, 5-ish minutes and we go from there. But I feel like you're a new name, so I'd be curious to hear like what's got you showing up here.
So I'm working on Kima. I'm an architect on the Kima project.
Awesome.
And we're using Prow to build Kima, basically. We're right now trying to monitor the space to see what happens with Prow, where does it go. We're eagerly waiting for the first release. I know it's somewhere on the roadmap.
Yeah.
We're right now planning, so because we just use a little subset of the services that you use, we have a request from our team to, for example, to start using TestGrid. So we talked to some guys at Cloud Next that we could be allowed to just publish our results, since we're open source, onto your TestGrid dashboard by adding a pull request and just pushing our results there. So I think we're going to do that pretty soon. We're also looking into using Tide very soon. We don't use that yet, but I think it's taking a lot of work out of our hands if we just use Tide to merge PRs, and that's one of the things that we're looking into. And yeah, that's why I'm here, basically.
Awesome. Just in case we do end up using this recording, I'm going to say my spiel now, but I reserve the right to decide this is just sort of an informal thing, and maybe we won't post it. Just in case, hi, welcome to the weekly SIG testing meeting. Today is Tuesday, June 4th. I'm Aaron Kirkenberger of SIG Beard. And you are all here adhering to the Kubernetes code of conduct by not being jerks. You can go watch yourselves doing so, because this is a publicly recorded medium and this will be posted to YouTube later on. So Daniel, I think it's really cool. Do you prefer Daniel or Dan?
It doesn't matter. Like, whatever is better off the tongue.
Cool. So Daniel, I think it's cool that Kima is using Prow, where like we haven't necessarily been super pushy about, we don't have like a product manager. So it's been really encouraging to see people pick this up and use it on their own. How would you feel about like maybe giving a presentation to this group sometime later about sort of what your setup looks like, what's working well for you, and what's not working well for you, just to sort of maybe help us start to focus a little bit more on our users outside of people from the Kubernetes project?
Sure, we could do that.
Okay. I'm like to your comment about like there being a 1.0 at some point.
I'm also happy with a 0.1. I just want an official release in the GitHub. That's what we're looking for, because right now we're cherry picking on, like, we go to the announcement MD and then check for the feature that we want. We check for the date that is in front of it, and then check with that date, cross-reference one of the commits, like possibly the last commit of that day or the next day, and use that as a base for our new deployment of the update, basically.
Okay.
So I would be happy if for example, you, instead of just using the announcement MD, like make that a changelog MD maybe, and use, instead of May 13th, 2019, just make it version 0.001. And
Right.
that would be nice for us, because then we can say like, oh, this is the latest tech that we just deployed. It's version 001.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel as though tacking a version onto something implies a level of support that maybe doesn't exist there yet, which may be why we're not at that phase. Like,
yeah, I think we talked to the guys in Cloud Next, and they were saying it's also a problem of the many components, and that would have to be coordinated for releases and everything. So
a little bit. One of the overarching concerns I have is like, what is PROW versus what is all of our project-specific bits and bobs and configuration and things like that. Like, I really would like to see the PROW code base split out of the Kubernetes test infra repo, and for PROW to become its own project that has its own life cycle. And Kubernetes PROW instance is but one running instance of that PROW. And that starts to get us to that like maturity level of, it should probably have a roadmap, and it should probably have releases, and we should be mindful of backwards compatibility. So I think,
yeah, I mean that is a big thing for us as well. Since I'm from SAP, I mean Kima is SAP, so we're heavily looking into what else Google is doing as well. So for example, I moved one of our development teams just last year from a Jenkins installation to Google Cloud Build, for example. I know that Aaron and Christy have been in the Google Cloud Build team, or are still. I don't know about the current setup, but they're now doing Tekton. So it's very interesting for me as well, and for us at SAP to see, where does Cloud Build go? Where does PROW go? Where does TestGrid go? What is going to be pushed as maybe the sole CI/CD? Are they going to be merged at one point? Because I know we talked to Christy about Tekton maybe leveraging PROW in the background, or PROW being PROW being the backend, and Tekton just being the front end of that. And I just like, it's very interesting to see. I'm in all three spaces kind of, and I'm looking where things are going, and it's very interesting because also, by not having releases, it's kind of, I don't know where Kubernetes test infra is going if we don't have releases really. But I mean, we're using it and it's working fine for us. So so far I'm happy.
Yeah, like I said, this was not something we ever built with a plan to turn into its own project or product or whatever.
Yeah.
It's solely like, oh my God, managing a couple hundred Jenkins instances is really terrible and painful. We need to do something better. And so it has largely evolved to meet our needs. But the fact that other people have picked it up organically and adopted it makes me think we should be more mindful of all of that. Yes, there is some overlap with Tekton. There's also like overlap with GitHub Actions, for example. And
yeah,
we'd really rather find the ways where we can be as complementary as possible and reduce the surface area of things that we need to support. So I know for Tekton, for example, like, I don't think we want to turn PROW into this crazy complicated scheduling thing. And Tekton pipelines seem to do a good job of expressing a directed acyclic graph of different jobs and workflows and stuff. So maybe we could just have like PROW trigger Tekton if you have a lot of complicated workflows. And I think we have a pipeline controller. I saw a large PR for it anyway. I don't know where we're at in actually like landing it and using it effectively. I think we kind of live in a state today where the deployment of PROW that is used by the Kubernetes project is sort of like the de facto deployment of PROW. But I don't think it's a very good canonical example of how to deploy and use PROW effectively. And
you have a lot of plugins attached to it, and we're typically not going for the latest version. So if we see announcement MD, and I don't know, I think the last one was somehow mid-May, May 13th or something. I'm not sure, but I already told someone today because we're like, maybe we should update Prow again. I'm like, yeah, but never pick the latest line in the announcement MD. Pick something before that, because we've seen typically that you do updates of Prow and then you roll it back maybe the next day because you figured out it didn't work the way that you want it, and like you do another update the day after. So we're always waiting for a more stable version. So like
Great.
2-3 days without any changes in the announcement MD, and that's a good release for us to use.
Yeah, it's fun using one of the most active, most chaotic open source projects in the world as your guinea pig, as your staging environment, because I guess we test live in production or something. We'd love to find a way to not do that, but I gather you're using us as your staging environment, and then you sort of do the same thing, I'm guessing, where like you pick something, you try it out, and if it doesn't blow up, great.
Yeah, we usually do Prow upgrades with like a separate cluster first, check that our jobs are running, and then we basically push that to our main Prow.
Okay.
And if then it blows up, we have to roll back. But usually, as soon as we see it working on our Prow fork, that is an indicator for us that it works, and we can use it on our production cluster.
Okay. So like, is it just sort of a dummy staging cluster that's hooked up to a couple dummy repos or something?
So currently the setup is super manual for that Prow fork cluster. So every time we want to do something, that the person that is doing the upgrade has to set up everything manually, basically. So either connecting to their own GitHub repositories if you want to do testing of new jobs maybe, and you want to do changes and PRs on that repository, because we don't want to create dummy PRs on the production repository eventually, just to test that PRs are still working, or actually connecting to the live repo, I want to say, and just seeing that everything works still. And we just learned about this make PJR. I think the project inside Test Infra that is creating the jobs so that I can push them to Prow and have like an ad hoc run of a job definition. So that has helped us a little bit as well. That's pretty cool. But I think there's a lot of stuff in Test Infra that we haven't touched, because also I inherited kind of the ownership of the Prow thing from a team that basically said, hey, we need to move away from Jenkins and quickly move on to something else, and they decided for Prow. And some of the things, I think they're just not there because they ran out of time in terms of what else can we add that makes our life easier. So we're looking into ways of what can we get from the Prow Test Infra Kubernetes that makes our life easier. And so we're cherry picking right now, TestGrid as one, Tide as another one, just seeing what else we can use from you guys.
Okay. Yeah, your comment earlier about using TestGrid, maybe is my
yeah,
using that TestGrid. So like we are in the process of like trying to turn the gears to get approval to open source parts of that, or rewrite parts of it. There are good chunks of it that are tied up in a bunch of magical Google stuff that I don't understand. I tend to like avoid all of the Google internal stuff so that I can talk about everything that I work on. That's just sort of how I operate.
Yeah.
I know that we're working on that, but we're also sort of trying to be a little cognizant that we maybe have a bunch of stuff that's using a Kubernetes Prow instance that's not Kubernetes related. And it's kind of unclear where we want to draw the boundary for that as a community. especially as we think about like what it is that the community needs to support from an on-call perspective. So like it's in this pleasant overlap where there are a couple projects that like come from Google, like Bazel or cAdvisor, or maybe Kubeflow, that like they're not actually part of the Kubernetes community, but since the only people who can support Prow and all of the other testing for right now are Googlers, like we'll carry the torch. But we have stood up like a Google Prow instance that's for Google open source stuff. And I think we're looking to move things over there. It's unclear to me whether we might do something similar for test grid as well. So that's just that's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked to the Googlers at Google Next, they were saying we don't need an open source test grid at the moment for Kima to be able to publish results on the K8s test grid side. So apparently they said that it should be a matter of adding our upstream in a pull request, I think, so that it displays on your website. And the only requirement that you guys have is that our project is open source, which Kima is.
That's probably all true. Like if the docs disagree with me, the docs disagree with me.
I mean, we will try our best with the pull request, and if it gets declined, we will have to see what we can do about it or how we can talk to you guys about it.
Okay. So I feel like I've heard a lot about your interest in Prow from a roadmap and planning perspective, and I'd like to figure out how to turn Prow into more of a formalized sub-project that we can talk about and include you as contributors over there. Kaslin, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, you mentioned you sort of wanted to show up as a newer contributor interested to help out. Sort of, where are you coming from? What are you interested in? And how could we help you out?
Yeah, so hello everyone, I'm Kaslin. I went to the Contributor Summit at KubeCon EU, and I've been interested in contributing to Kubernetes for a while, and I've been considering which SIG I should start looking into. I have a background in testing because I was a quality assurance engineer at one point, and I think that testing is really cool and interesting, so I thought I would ask about SIG testing and try to learn more about what you all are working on and how I could contribute.
That sounds awesome. I wish I had a well-groomed backlog to offer you, but
that's okay. It's open source. That's how it goes, right?
Yeah. So I feel like the answer I want to give you is like, take a look at our Good First issue and help wanted issues that live in the test info repo and see if anything in particular interests you there. I honestly can't speak to exactly like what it is we're doing this quarter off the top of my head, just because KubeCon EU I'm still kind of in recovery from that. And also a lot of my teams working on a lot of, I was working on a lot of different things, but I think like to Daniel's point about sort of Prow becoming its own project, I have sort of a longer term interest in getting all of the Prow stuff into its own sub-project or like its own repo, and getting the community to manage like the Prow instance and the community to own all of the infrastructure and stuff. So there's lots of like shuffling around of bits that need to happen for that. Another place that I find new contributors often have a fun time contributing to is some of the plugins and automation related to like workflow on this project. So Prow's plugin model is relatively simple. It seems like it's maybe a nicer area of code to try comprehending than the entirety of the Kubernetes code base. And it could be that you have some itches you want to scratch as a result of interacting with pull requests and stuff on the Kubernetes project. And you may find that there are contributions you feel like you want to make there. We're also like I know one of our interns just updated the cat plugin so that I think if you /nope, you get a grumpy cat. we're like totally down for fun stuff like that to just sort of get your feet wet and understand how all of that works as well.
Cool. That sounds interesting. I don't know much about this prowl.
Sure. Prow, P-R-O-W, stands, so like, because it's Kubernetes, I guess we felt like everything has to have a nautical reference, and so prow.
Of course, has to be a boat thing.
Yeah. So prow's the front of the ship, and then like I was alluding to, it's not exactly a cohesive product, but it's just a bunch of like small distributed services, many of which are kind of designed to work together to do sort of an if this then that style workflow for Kubernetes, and then have some like emergent things come out of that. And so a common way of this happening is we have a component called hook, which takes in things from GitHub. It receives webhooks from there, and then it will shunt that off to a bunch of plugins that register like what kinds of events that they can respond to. And some of those plugins include things like, so the cat plugin I alluded to earlier, if somebody comments /meow, it will go talk to the cat API, find an image, and then post a GitHub comment to the appropriate issue or pull request with that image. It's awesome. We have a dog plugin as well, because of course we do.
Fun anecdote, we use the cat plugin to test that Prow is actually working with GitHub.
I usually do too, honestly. It's also kind of been my, my bump comment if something's not getting a lot of attention. We also added a /pony command because one of our team members maintains the Pony API or the Pony database. So Pony Party is always a fun one. Then it can also, so a lot of those are like interacting with GitHub directly. It's how we do issue triage as well before GitHub introduced their triage rule. Allows people who don't have write access to the repo to like /priority important soon, and it'll apply that label. And then there are plugins like Trigger, which will go off and trigger jobs somewhere. When we originally wrote it, it was like, go trigger a Jenkins job over here, and then wait for Jenkins to report back that it's done. And these days we now like, go trigger a job in a Kubernetes cluster. So yeah, like if this then that, but for GitHub. We also have folks from CloudBees working on abstracting away the for GitHub part. And we also internally run part of an installation of Prow that runs against Garrett or Jarrett, I don't know how you pronounce it. Because if it works really well for GitHub, maybe it would work really well for other like source control system integrated things of choice. Then there are like a bunch of other random tools that I'm not going to try and list off the top of my head in our repo, but if that interests you, there's that. And then like if you're interested in just trying to go after like pretty easy mechanical checklist type stuff, I feel like I need to file an issue for us to convert our Python scripts to Python 3 because Python 2 is end of lifing at the end of this year. And so we could work through what those scripts look like and which ones you want to modify, things of that nature. We generally are responsive in the SIG testing channel. If there's anything like you want to work on and you need help with, ask, and we can help out there.
Cool, thanks. That was a pretty good overview. So I'll look into the Prow thing and try to learn more about how that works, and then try to look at some of your good first bug type stuff.
Cool.
That'll be a good place to start.
I appreciate that. I would like to try and do like more of a overview of what we do and an onboarding spiel to help out, because I do think we haven't been super mindful of the onboarding rate for new contributors. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Any feedback you have, any advice you have, let me know, and I will do what I am able to do there.
Cool.
Also tend to have, because we're focused on a lot of the automation that runs the project, we have some overlap with the folks in SIG contributor experience. And so if there are oftentimes another thing that can happen is people will think up ways to sort of help improve the way that the project works in contributor experience, and then we'll sort of help figure out how to actually implement that and deploy that code and make sure it works super well.
Cool.
So
I have one more thing, maybe.
sure.
We're looking into monitoring of Prowl. How do you guys do that? That would be interesting for us because currently Prowl crashes and it doesn't recover sometimes, and we only find out because it doesn't work anymore. So someone goes in and restarts it. But how do you monitor Prowl crashing? Do you monitor it?
We don't monitor it well enough. We kind of, I think, take the same approach as you, only we have the benefit of a 24-hour globally distributed high-traffic open source community to keep us on our toes. So Prowl does expose a number of metrics that can be scraped via Prometheus. I think we also stand up a Prometheus push gateway as part of our stack, to which like Tide, I think, pushes some metrics about how many pull requests it's handling and how many pull requests it thinks are eligible for merge, things of that nature. And I know that Steve Kuznetsov, who's another one of the chairs for this SIG, runs a large Prowl deployment over at OpenShift, and they kind of have a monitoring stack put together to alert on various things. I don't know more than that, but I think what he is attempting to land may help satisfy some of your needs. I will say, I don't believe that our Prowl instance like topples over unprompted. Generally, the problems that I have seen us experience in production relate to GitHub's API misbehaving for us, rather than instances like ooming or running out of I/O or something. Like,
yeah, I think it's always our fault that it crashes. It's just that we don't notice that until like 3 PRs later that haven't been tested.
Yeah, I mean that often like the bot doesn't seem to be doing anything from a random community member is our first heads up that something is wrong. I do think that we have like health Z endpoints on all of our Prowl components, and health Z I understand to be just like a common API endpoint that you can hit and get back a 200 OK if the thing is up and running. I don't know if, I feel like we had that exposed to a Prometheus thing at one point.
Yeah, we don't use Tide, and as you were saying, the metrics are pushed by Tide. That might be one of the things why we don't have proper monitoring. Like we have a story in the backlog actually to use Tide, and then maybe we can look into what Tide does for Prometheus, so we can scrape that and get a Grafana dashboard or something.
Some stuff, but I feel like what you were asking is pretty bare bones. Like, is it alive? Is it up? So someplace you could look to see if or how we implement that is Velodrome is sort of, it's a complicated code base, but if you go to velodrome.k8s.io, really all we use that for now is the fact that it has a Grafana instance that's pointed at an InfluxDB instance. And we push data into that InfluxDB instance via BigQuery runs. You maybe don't care so much about that, but I feel like somewhere in that Velodrome, in one of those Grafana dashboards is something that was called a black box prober dashboard, and I feel like that looked at the health Z endpoints of all the Prowl components. That may not be there right now. I'm not 100% sure. So I can link to the monitoring stack issue that Steve brought my attention to as another place for you to take a look. But I feel like Tide is not so much about the health of Prowl. The Tide metrics are literally just like how many PRs are we handling? Are we handling enough of them?
Mm-hmm.
From that perspective of like good monitoring monitors the work that is done, not necessarily all of these meaningless system metrics like CPU and memory and stuff. But is it up or not would be a pretty good bare bones thing for you as well.
Yeah. We'll have a look. We haven't started looking into it. It's just one of the requests that we have. Like, hey, we notice Prowl sometimes doesn't work, and we know that it's our fault that it crashes, but we don't know when it doesn't work, and we just need to see that we get a monitoring stack for that. So.
Okay, I've got to run. I'm losing my room. Thank you all for your time. I will.
Thank you.
Offline. Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good one.